Okay. I've been sent two questions. One of them is from Rosemary, and I'll let you just, if you want to tell us what it is, I'll let you do it, or I can read it.
Yes, I was wondering about a situation where a participant, for whatever reason, is not actually fully engaging with the session. Maybe it's fear, they don't want to be out of control. But if that person has a great trauma, so with doing the different hand positions in the positions that come up, and that trauma comes to the surface, however, the client is not really wanting to let go of their own control of the session, is it possible for them to go back into their trauma and just relive the trauma but not resolve it? So effectively, he's just, they're just being re-traumatized by what's going on. And does it progress? Is stuff being resolved? Is there any?
Well, look, I'm going to read. I'm going to just jump in here and read what you said because it's a little more concise. Is it possible for a client to re-traumatize themselves by not allowing themselves to enter wholly into the Shen process? Perhaps through fear, or trauma, or desire, the need to stay in control. And then there's an added thing to that I'll get into later. Does anybody want to say anything before I jump in here and say something? Well, okay, look, here's the deal. What you're saying is that fear is coming up. Now, let me ask you, if fear is coming up and they're afraid of it, are you going to work at the fear center? Rosie?
Yes, you would.
No, you wouldn't.
But if they are not allowing that,
hey,
telling you to go away.
I'm telling you, no, you wouldn't work at the fear center. You'd work at the cough.
Oh, okay.
You'd work at the cough.
Yeah.
You've got the opportunity of strengthening one of the two emotions, the emotions of confidence or the emotions of fear.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay, I'm with that. Yes.
That makes sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You've always got an option of where you want to work. And I gave an example once, I believe, of a fellow that I had who was he was a mental case, among other things, but he was his doctor sent him to me to see if I could do anything with Shen. And every time I'd get close to he'd relax and everything. And so as soon as the fears start coming up, he'd just flash up and just sit up and, oh, I'm afraid. And finally I realized I can't work there. I've got to go down and avoid that as much as possible. So you would work at the cough and never go above the rearward position between the two centers. And as time would go on, and I've had this happen where people would come back and later, and the level of fear had dropped to a point where they were saying, I'm not so frightened about being afraid.
Okay.
All right. Now Adriana's with us. I'm glad.
Richard, Monica's just sent me a text message saying she's very sorry she couldn't make the meeting, but she's passed on her apologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's what Adriana wrote. How to approach and work with and evaluate progress when dealing with a client who, alongside Shen, is also involved in other therapy work. She goes on to say, I had a client who was receiving Shen, shamanic healing, and attending shamanic retreats and courses. but heard about Shen from someone she met during the shamanic training who had also received Shen and attended Shen workshops. This client also did daily yoga and meditation. I gave her 7 Shen sessions. There was progress. She acknowledged her life and well-being had improved. But alongside the weekly Shen sessions, she was also getting more involved with the shamanic practice. She was very engaged in our sessions, but used to tell me that she had been working on what she had been working on in the shamanic practice. In the end, I just accepted the changes. The experiences were a result of both practices. Any guidance for similar situations I may receive in the future? All right, who wants to comment on that one? Well, I have a big...
Well, my understanding from, you know, when we do Shen is to really always say to the client, it's always best when they have a specific therapy to just have a series of therapy without having too many things going on at the same time. Because it's quite difficult then to suss out, isn't it, which is helping and which is not, if they're having it in the same block.
Elena, I think you're asking the impossible. You're asking the client to not do something that she's involved in.
No, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just explaining to the client.
It's what?
It's not a hard and fast rule that you wouldn't do Shen just because they have another therapy, but just explaining to the client, you know, that it's quite hard sometimes to tease out which of the therapy is helping if they have it in the same block. That's all. Well, you can't control what the client what chooses to have, can we? We have no control about that.
Well, my first question would be, Adriana, what would you do if she was seeing a medical doctor at the same time she was seeing you?
If she was saying, say it
a
again,
medical
sorry.
Doctor, a physician, a medical doctor.
Yeah. What would be my reaction? You ask.
Would you be asking me these questions if she were
No, because I would assume that the issues the client would present a medical doctor would be different. Well, in this case,
you haven't been reading the Shen literature. We work on lots of problems that a medical doctor would work on.
Okay, but
eating disorders.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just focusing on my recent experience where everything was on an emotional level, and I just took her as she was.
Well, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, but I realized because we started in October, last October, by November, she was very keen on she was already, you know, she was trusting me. She was very keen, having more Shen, even beyond my maximum 10 sessions. She was asking, can I have Shen from your mentor? Can I have Shen from Sister Francisca? Can I have Shen, blah, blah, blah. And then because there was the workshop in London and of 3 or 4 weeks, she did more retreats. She went deeper into the shamanic practice, and things moved. You know, yeah. But then I could feel, okay, now Shen, she lost interest in Shen, and I thought, and I even spoke to Sister Corona and said, I asked her at the end of the session, I said, but do you like a break? How do you feel? Oh, yes, maybe let's have a break. Thank you very much. She was very thankful. She was very, you know, I don't know if she was being just polite, but I was left feeling, because she used to tell me in detail what she was working on with the shamanic practices. And I thought, gosh, you know, I don't know.
Look, you don't know anything about shamanic work.
Pardon?
You don't know anything about shamanic work, and I don't think you've ever had any.
I haven't received any shamanic work. Okay. I know it's to do with spirits, but you know, she was saying, I'm doing the wield and I'm on. on
Look,
the West, and
you're
I'm working
the,
on the emotion. So this is good. I get work from you and from the shaman, in the beginning. Later, she was having full retreats, week-long retreats, and I thought, wow. And deep experiences. And she was talking about the belly button. I'm thinking, okay, you are talking about your solar plexus cast line. It was a pain and it was this. And I'm thinking, I don't know what you are talking about. I was.
Adriana, you're worrying yourself over nothing. You would not be acting like this if it was a medical doctor. You wouldn't be saying, oh my God, what is the medical doctor doing? How is that going to affect my practice? You're dealing with the emotions and that's it. What I did see out of this is that I think you spent too much time listening to this woman tell you about her shamanic experiences.
Probably.
And get her out of her being aware of her body and being into what was happening on the emotional level, which is where you need to be focused. But I was well into Shen when I got introduced to shamanic practices, and I met some of the leaders in the field. And I had some very interesting shamanic experiences. And the only thing I can say about them and how they related to Shen was that some of them were related to fear. And I know where to work on fear in the body, but I didn't go to a shaman and say, okay, get this fear out of my body. And as far as you mentioned that she was taking yoga and all of these things, well, is there anybody that's in this conversation that hasn't gotten involved in yoga? Has it stopped you from doing good Shen? Not a bit of it. It's fine. Yoga, if anything, will just stretch the body out and open things up to where there's less physical tightness and easier for the emotions to come out.
Richard, I have a question to
Sure,
add
Lauren.
onto this. What if the client is overdoing it with too many healing practices at the same time, and then the Shen is working even deeper than what they can actually physically, what they can cope with, like psychologically?
I'm not quite clear what you're looking at, but I can tell you that I've never stopped working with a client with Shen because she had some other. Maybe she would be at a medical doctor and the doctor might say, I don't want you to have any Shen until later, but I never stopped seeing somebody because they had a medical condition.
Okay,
I've had people come to me with a medical condition that they wanted me to fix with Shen that I knew I couldn't do.
Yeah.
But I worked with them anyway. In one case in particular was a woman, I believe she was in her 30s, and she had breast cancer. It was quite severe. And she came wanting me to heal her breasts. Well, I'm not foolish enough to think I can do that, but I know that she's very afraid, and she was determined that she wasn't going to have an operation, that she was going to get it healed by some other method. She didn't care if it was wheatgrass or bathing in the ocean or whatever, or Shen. She wasn't going to have an operation, period. After the third session, and most of my work, while I was doing a lot of flows around her breast, I was also working. Where would you work with her? Before I say where I was working, where would you work with somebody like that?
Kath?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent a lot of time with her, Kath, and she called up after the first session and says, I'm going to cancel my next visit. I'm going back to Boston and have the operation. Now, I thought Shen was a success.
Yeah.
because my intention was to get her solid into her koth where she could get out of her fear and do whatever was necessary. Boston was where she came from, and she flew back to Boston to have the operation.
Okay.
No, I would have been. Well, anyway.
Can I just come back to
Yeah.
Rosie's question about re-traumatization? I think she poses the question, it really kind of made me think. One of the main questions was whether it's possible for a client to get re-traumatized on the table, isn't it? That was your question.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going back to Adriana's question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because I wanted also to clarify in my own mind, because I always thought because the way we do Shen and the way you have developed the program, unless if the client is in the process, I didn't feel they could get re-traumatized. They might get memory of the, so there's a slight distinction, isn't it, between maybe having memory of the thing. Is having the memory re-traumatization? Are they both the same thing?
Look, I think that re-traumatizing is not a word that's even applicable in what we're talking about.
I didn't think it applies in Shen. That's
No,
why
it doesn't. It's not. We're talking about re-traumatizing someone would mean that you would have to introduce a new episode of that type of trauma. Now, and there are processes like that, which I don't find very practical or useful. There is one that is still practiced. It's where you take the person into the edge of this trauma. And one example that was being given was taking someone who was deathly afraid of heights up at the top of a skyscraper and taking him out to the edge and make him stay there until they went through terror and fear and grief and finally just wore out and let it pass. It didn't always work. And I thought it was dangerous and was not an approach. Shen is about releasing what's in there. It's not about putting something in there. And there wasn't anything that Adriana described that I felt had to do with putting something new or of the same sort into her process or into the situation.
I think what she may mean is it possible to bring up terror, fear, and rather than completing the circle of that emotion, to leave it incomplete and therefore the person's walking out with those emotions up without it having been completed. I think that's what she might.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to try to get any deeper into Adriana's process with this person because it's just going to get us tangled up in discussion. But Shen is about two things: releasing pent-up emotion and strengthening the koth. And bringing them to a place of wholeness where they could face the world. And some of the times when we work, we come upon surprises where we're working with them for some little fear or something, and all of a sudden the ancient big fear jumps out, which we suspected was in there, but didn't know it was in there, didn't know anything about it. So what we're doing in Shen is we're assisting what the body or what the soul would like to do. to expel the fear and feel good about oneself. Maybe even being able to feel a little love somewhere. What I'm saying here is don't overthink what you're doing. The simpler approach you got, the better it'll be. And the examples I gave you of how I've worked were just very simple things. It's like I just went to a little different location. If you're afraid, I'm going to go work with your cough. If I can't get you into your fear, then I'm going to work at this at the solar plexus. But I think that Adriana did a very good job with that client. It sounded like that the client made a lot of progress. She acknowledged it. And the only mistake Adriana got involved in was trying to suss out what was going on with her shamanic work, which, number one, Adriana wouldn't really be able to do successfully because she doesn't really understand shamanic work and hasn't participated in it and see what it might be like. So it's just like someone outside of Shen who is looking at Shen saying, release emotions with your hands? What are you talking about? That's crazy talk. Or something like that. You know, every one of you has stood outside of Shen. Some of you said, hey, wait a minute. A lot of you took Shen to the Shen session the first time because some friend of yours had a good session that said you ought to try it. You got a lot of problems, you ought to try it. And they had good results and moved on. But yeah, keep it simple, and you'll be better off. I see your chat. Adriana just sent me a chat, says she's getting periods of complete silence because she thinks her internet is unstable. Well, she's right. So does anybody else have a technical thing or a Shen subject you'd like to talk about?
Richard, I don't know if you got my question. I was asking about backflows.
Oh, did you send me a question?
Yeah, it was just about backflows.
Okay, I must have missed it. When did you send it?
Oh, I can't remember now. It was this week.
Oh, okay, I guess I missed it. What do you want to know? What is your question?
It was sort of, so when we do the training, we obviously do a backflow session, which is, you know, the chart.
Yeah.
My question is, I think the answer is yes, but is it sometimes, it appears to be sometimes useful to do a part backflow. So backflows just behind the heart, for example. Sometimes that appears to be useful. And my question was, when do we know it might be useful to do backflows?
Okay.
Yeah.
I developed, we didn't do backflows for a long time in the first part of Shen. Until one day I thought about that. I thought, gee, we've done all this opening out of the front part of the body, all this releasing and all this expansion. What has that done to the field on the back? Has it all compressed up or what's going on? So we just tried it. And I just did the opposite, followed the rotary part as did the outward to the inside. The way that I laid it out, and it was amazing. They often oh, I feel so good, I feel so much better, and it's wonderful, and some occasionally had a specific memory come or something like that, but it was just a case of saying, hey, it's time to do this because we've done all this work on the other side, on the front and the sides of the body. And it's like everything is all pulled around in the back, and it's time to go do the back work.
Hmm.
And that's
Okay.
been very, and that's why it was put into the training near the end, after the as sort of a cleanup thing, as part of that. And if someone complained a lot of having back pains, I certainly would do it as earlier on, or as a, okay, this time we're going to work on the back and do the back sessions. That cover it for you, Joni?
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else to record here, I'm going to stop the recording. And